there, I'm Matthew Wooding. Welcome to Ramblings of an Undiscovered Author. Now today we're having a chat with David Reiss, author of Fid's Crusade and Behind Distant Stars. So without any further ado, we'll keep the rambling to a minimum and let's get on and meet David Reiss. Okay, so I'm joined by David Reiss, author of Fid's Crusade and Behind Distant Stars. First of all, David, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate the time.
My pleasure.
Now, I did see on your author bio that you are a self-confessed geek. Is this true?
Yes, it is. I've been, geek and nerd and everything similar for as long as I can remember.
So I wanted to know, and we all have this moment, when was the moment that you hit like peak nerd, that you look back and you think, yeah, that might have been a bit too far?
Okay, there was an obscure artist that I was meeting at a sci-fi con, and I, honest to goodness, asked her, I wanted a signature, I didn't have anything, I asked her sign my forehead. That was it. I was peak geek right there.
It's one of those things, because autographs, if you don't have something, you kind of get desperate, don't you? And the forehead's right there, so...
Exactly, and I figured at least it's something for her to tell people about, so...
It could have been worse. You could have got the tattoo of the signature on your forehead, and then, you wouldn't have been able to pretend it didn't happen. Now, you're a fan of comic books, I see too. What is your favourite comic book?
Wow, okay. I had been a fan of comic books in my youth. I've
Oh, okay.
away. No, I am a fan still. I just don't read as many as I should. I feel like I need to get back into it. I think my favorite of all time is probably the Sandman series by Neil Gaiman. After that is probably the early New Mutants. That had a tremendous effect on me going through through my teenage years. It got kind of weird once you get up to issue 80 or so, but especially the earlier stuff I found very powerful. Excellent. Sorry, continue.
Oh, no, I was going to say, because a lot of the comic books now, obviously, Marvel, they're getting all made into movies. Do you like that when the comic books are made into movies, or it doesn't sort of have the same effect on you?
I didn't used to like it, but I absolutely adore the current Marvel movies. I think that they are powerful, and they create a mythology that is really entertaining for me. And even some of the DC movies, I thought the Wonder Woman one was excellent.
Yeah.
So I should say that I love when they make movies well. I think that's great. But there have been some rather remarkable failures along the way, and those are painful because when you do something that fans love, they have a lot of personal feeling for, and it comes out and they do a terrible job on the big screen, it feels like they're just stabbing you in the heart.
Yeah,
and you loved has just been made terrible.
And they usually get told about it too, don't they? So I'm sure they don't like that they butchered it either. Now, one thing that almost sucked me in that I just I missed out on a little bit was Warhammer. Did you ever get into Warhammer when that was really big? What was that, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I was more into BattleTech, the figurine games, but I got into Warhammer a little bit. My biggest issue with Warhammer was I was okay at painting an individual figure, but Warhammer required such huge armies that by the time I painted an entire army, I was no longer interested in playing it. So
see, that's actually what rescued me from Warhammer, is because I cannot paint. I just can't do it. And I went in and I would have been sucked right in. And I asked them, but can you paint them for me? And they're like, no, that's like half the fun. It's like painting isn't fun for me, and they wouldn't do it. So that actually probably saved me a lot of money in the end, because it meant that I didn't get sucked into Warhammer.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where every once in a while I consider getting into again the wargaming, and there's always a part of me that says I don't have the storage space, I don't have the money to invest in it. Leave well enough alone. I'll borrow someone else's army if I need to play in a game.
Fair enough. Now, your day job is a software engineer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, I have to ask: is that games or is that the boring stuff?
The boring stuff.
Oh, okay.
I work primarily in networking, networking products for the last last 20 some odd years. So.
Okay, so that's not going to have much of an effect on your writing or storytelling then.
No, except for the fact there's a lot of other engineers who are geeks, so I have people to talk to.
Fair enough, fair enough. Now, your books, they follow Dr. Fid. Now, I think he can only be described as a flawed hero. Now, how did you arrive on having such a main character in your books?
Well, actually, Dr. Fid is more of a supervillain than a superhero.
Flawed.
Yeah, flawed. Let's call the bank robberies and all that. Those are flaws. Okay, no, I think the reason I've always been enthralled by the antagonists in stories. I read Grendel by James Gardner when I was very young.
Okay.
And that's, Beowulf's Grendel, but it's from Grendel's perspective. And so from that point forward, I've always been intrigued by what the villain was thinking, why they do the things they do. I feel villains are often more proactive. They have something they want. The heroes are reacting to what the villain does. So if you think about who the characters are that are really drivers of plot lines, they're the villains. So I had decided that I was going to write what was, I'm going to say, traditionally a young adult or young-oriented genre, the superhero prose, and I wanted to do a real deep dive into what the villain was thinking and why they do the things they do. And I really fell in love with the character along the way. And you're right, he is flawed. He's not evil. He's not mustache-twirling bad guy type thing, of course. But he's flawed, and those flaws define his past and his motivation for changing over the future. So it's a fun character.
Now, you kind of answered my next question there, but who or what was the inspiration behind Dr. Fid?
Wow, okay. There was no real one inspiration. There's certain characters that I had in mind. He's in some ways very much kind of a Doctor Doom-like character. Is tremendously powerful, powered armor. He's in some ways bigger than life and like Doom, but at the same time he's I'm going to say more focused on individual tasks. He's not trying to take over the world. That's what would he do with it? He has specific goals, and he's trying to achieve them in a way that he knows is not legal, but he believes that the cause was sufficiently just that it justified all of his actions.
Fair enough. Now tell us a little bit about the world in which Fid exists.
Okay. It's a world of superheroes and supervillains. Heroes, superpowers had been existing for about 60 years or so when the story starts. So there's a lot of history there. Going back in time, you can talk about the characters, talking about things they watched growing up, who are their favorite heroes, that sort of thing. And that largely informs Dr. Fid's background and why he becomes a villain. What he thinks of the heroes is that sort of hero worship, that sense of celebrity that the heroes have gotten, has, to Dr. Fid, he feels that the heroes are not really worthy of that. And a lot of his actions are really designed around trying to make sure that the heroes are reminded that they're human underneath their masks, and they're not worthy of the worship that they're receiving. So I think that let's see, about the world, it's similar to, I'm going to say, modern world, but with some differences simply because there were heroes around. Certain wars turned out differently, but for the most part, it's around modern age.
Fair enough. Now, Fid's Crusade is the first book in the series, and the second book, Behind Distant Stars, just released like a couple of weeks ago, right? So congratulations on that, first of all. That's a really big deal, so congratulations. Now, is this going to be the last of Fid's adventures, or do you foresee some more in the future?
I originally envisioned the series as a trilogy. I have storylines for the first 3 stories around Dr. Fid's adventures. It is possible I may continue it past that, but this is intended to be it's a full character growth arc across 3 novels. Each one is its own arc, certainly, but there was one overarching theme for those 3. And we'll see if I continue it past that. I'm midway through book 3 at the moment.
Depends if Hollywood comes knocking or not, right? So.
Well, to some extent, it's more if people ask. If I get people who are readers and they say they want to read more, then I have more stories.
Well, there you go. You got to get on the internet and on the Twitter and their Facebook and make sure you're telling David to write more, because I've got Fitz Crusades queued up on my Kindle ready to go, but I haven't actually confessed I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it's definitely queued up to go and very well reviewed as well. So for anyone that's just discovering David Reiss' book, what can we get? What's going to be inside the covers for us?
Well, for this series in particular, there's a certain amount of dark humor. The lead character is a little bit snarky, but there's a lot of focus on mindset and the emotion of why they do the things they do, and remembering both the good and bad of their own history. Most of my characters have a tendency to be a little bit older, so they have experiences that they reflect on, and good and bad. There's no one that's simple, I guess. There's everyone has they have baggage, and that. It's about living with your past a lot, at least in this series, which is about, again, a supervillain who's been active for over 20 years.
So there we go. Yeah, so like I said, definitely worth checking out. And it's Fitz Crusade and Behind Distant Stars. I'll have those links in the description at the bottom, so make sure that if you are interested, go and check out the sales links for those. And David has given me some social media and I think a website as well. Again, they'll be in the description, so make sure you check that out. But to take us out, David, you have kindly agreed to read a passage. Now, is this from Fitz Crusade or Behind Distant Stars?
I was thinking I'd read something from Behind Distant Stars.
Sounds good.
Context, this is a scene where the lead character, Dr. Fid, is interacting with another character named Valiant, who is probably the world's most powerful superhero. So that's what this scene's about, and let's see, other backstory that might be relevant. Dr. Fid is dealing with I'm going to say, an identity crisis, because he has been accused of heroism and is now trying to figure out what to do with that publicity. So that's where the scene sort of begins.
Perfect. Well, that's it for me this week, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed that, make sure you hit like. And if you are just discovering the channel, make sure you're subscribing. But to take us out, it is David Reiss reading a quick scene from Behind Distant Stars.
Lift 18 inches, I told Valiant, and stop. Good. It was remarkably quiet, despite the size of the gathered crowd. The onlookers kept their distance, the worksite was dangerously unstable, and had concentrated around the hastily strung-up barricade-taped perimeter. There were news crews, fiercely intent but speaking in almost reverent tones. There were also desperate parents and worried relatives and throngs of hopeful well-wishers. I'd anticipated shouting and wailing, furious anger and thrown bottles. Instead, there was only the pressure of their gaze and the weight of their longing. I orchestrated an invasion. 41 of my smaller construction drones crawled into the wreck like a swarm of metallic cockroaches escaping from the light, joining the hundreds of microdrones that were already present below. Some of the newly arrived robots sacrificed themselves, attaching permanently to twisted I-beams so that their structural integrity fields could shore up the groaning steel. Others deployed manipulating arms to shift fragments, to quickly cut away dangerous scrap, and to weld supports into place. The remainder were tasked with exploration and monitoring, feeding mountains of data for me to sift through and analyze. Okay, good. You can let go. And he did, carefully. His hands weren't shaking. Valiant's strength was legendary. Lifting a few thousand pounds of debris was no stretch of his abilities. In a different situation, he might have dived into the wreckage, tossing steel and concrete aside as if it weighed nothing. Now, however, he took a deep breath and waited slowly for my next order. That one next. It can stand a 3-foot lift, but moves slowly. The afternoon sun was sweltering, and I was grateful for the climate control systems in the Mark 35 heavy combat armor. There were no birds and few clouds, just the open blue sky, beautiful and clear, and offering no escape from the oppressive heat. Even Valiant had sweat beading at his brow, and I'd seen footage of the massive African-American hero diving into the mouth of an active volcano. He stood at 7.5 feet, yet always felt taller. There was a density to him, a presence, an instinctive awareness of his raw power that tugged at some long-forgotten instinct and told one's subconscious to be wary. I'd faced him in battle 3 times, and that sensation never dissipated. His sky blue and white costume had gathered red and brown stains from rust and dirt as we'd worked. We'd been here for more than an hour already, delicately lifting and shifting and shaping the mass of what would have been an enormous office complex had the construction been completed. The recently repaired Mark 35 stood 14 feet tall, and yet I somehow felt as though Valiant towered over me. "How are they doing?" he asked, the hint of a worried smile touching the corners of his lips. I consulted my sensors. "Stable," I replied, scared but holding up. "They have fresh air now, and my drones are providing light. I have a supply train bringing in fresh water and snacks. One of the teachers is having them sing." "Can I hear?" I routed audio to my armor's external speakers. I'd been focusing on the maths, the calculations necessary to forge a safe path through chaos, so I hadn't really listened. It had been just one more data stream, less pressing than updating models for metal fatigue or shifting stresses. Only half the children were singing, I thought, and their voices were untrained. I wasn't fluent enough in Chilean Spanish to catch all the words. It was a slow and hopeful song with a catchy chorus, something about a spider that was lost and alone but climbing towards the sun. Some of the voices were thready and weak, while others were enthusiastic. I'd been able to explain that the mighty Valiant was here to save them, and that had been enough to stop the majority of tears. Many of the voices, too, were off-key or missed the song's beat. It was one of the most beautiful things that I'd ever heard. "Let them hear, too." The hero nodded towards the gathered onlookers, his eyes wet with unshed tears. "Play it for them." "If this doesn't work, it would be cruel." "Then we damn well better make sure this works." After a moment's consideration, I nodded. My larger construction automatons were gathered along the edges of the disaster site, waiting for my orders to converge. For now, I made use of their speakers as I relayed the signal. If I thought the crowd silent before, then I'd been mistaken. A hush descended, and it felt as though the entire planet were holding its breath. There were a few choked sobs, a few prayers, and then one by one the gathered crowd joined to sing along. Rusty voices, throat tight from too much time spent weeping, slowly gained in strength until I imagined that I could feel the chorus in my chest even through my armor. With my face hidden behind the Mark 35's featureless mask, I could not wipe away my tears. So instead I turned to Valiant, voice gruff only to my own ears. "Good. We're ready for the next lift. That large chunk of concrete can be lifted free. The shifting weight won't cause any problems." This couldn't go wrong. I wouldn't allow it.